So what's it all about? What's at the bottom as I reflect on the several thousand hours of video that kind of started to pour forth as a little bit of a traumatic survival strategy about 4 years ago. And so I wanted to get at what I think is the core. I've been in more pain than well-being for most of my life. And after trying probably more than 100 different prescriptions, whether it's acupuncture or this therapist or that therapist or organic food or this diet or whatever it is, having lots of money, having lots of sex, we have various prescriptions for well-being. And what I've come to understand is that the original childhood traumas leading to some form of complex PTSD, with its shame, with its terror, with its loneliness, and with the isolation that comes in a culture that is so ignorant about these issues. I came to understand that no amount of money, no amount of gourmet food, travel, etc., was ever going to get to the core, was going to get to the issue. And the two things that I've found sustainably medicinal are emotional healing cultures. So in all my world travels, for example, to see if there is such a culture, that was one of my self-prescriptions. You don't feel happy in the United States, travel the world and see if there's some place that you do feel happy. And Thailand was an immediate, sustained 300% boost in well-being. It's an incredibly amazing culture. And I picked it because of its femininity. In the United States, when I have conversations, the response, very dry and automatically, is, oh, that's so interesting, that's interesting, that's so interesting. And so we have a fascination with mental masturbation in the United States that's largely dissociated from empathy and feeling. In Thailand, like so many things, it's the opposite. They're not interested in what is so interesting, but they're very interested in feeling, and they're very present and courteous, and they smile a lot. They're interested in being, would be a good way to say it. And it is so medicinal to be around such a culture. I've had periodic kind of waves of the suicide question. If I'm in more pain than well-being, one, check. And I've done just about everything I can think of on the outside, check. A great job, money, free time, good hobbies, etc. If I've bought all the things that I think are important to have, eat great food and all, if I've done all the stuff on the outside that, would commonly be touted as the American dream, etc. And after 40 years, I'm still more miserable than happy. It doesn't hold much logical sense to say if I just, have more money that I don't particularly need, or, have another house to clean and stuff. That doesn't make any sense. And so then one thing is, since you don't want to feel worse than you feel good, and if you've done all the reasonable things to do about that, then the logical expectation is that the next 40 years will also be more miserable than joyful and healing, etc. Trauma has been the new window, meaning one of the reasons I was suicidal at age 40 was, I'm now 45, was that I'd done $140,000 of therapy with more than 40 different practitioners, and could safely say that I felt worse than I did when I began that prescription 10 years before. And the thought of spending another $140,000 and another 10 years to feel even worse was like, that's enough. If something's going to be medicinal, it should show sustainable results by that point. And lo and behold, it turns out that absolutely none of my therapists and healers were doing their job because they were illiterate about trauma. I demonstrated traumatic symptoms, but none of them were either paying attention or understood the traumatic paradigm enough to say the simple, obvious thing: you're demonstrating traumatic symptoms. Have you read a trauma book, etc. And none of them had, in well over 1,000 hours of talk therapy, had ever said that one sentence. And a stranger in a cafe managed to do what none of those 40 therapists were able to do in 1,000 hours in the first 5 minutes. A stranger in a cafe suggested that I read a book on trauma. I read it that afternoon, and things began to shift. And this is an eye-opener. 40 therapists, so off their game that someone demonstrating traumatic symptoms doesn't, so this is troubling. Now, all of the reasons that I feel bad, whether it's, reading U.S. history in so many areas, looking at the education system that I experienced, traumatic abuse in, looking at the way we define professional as leave your personal stuff at the door. I mean, that's really it. Do your job and leave your personal stuff at the door. So don't be a person at work. Well, that's not really that much fun. And so I would say that the thing that I'm most passionate about, that I value, is empathic, intelligent kindness with quality time. And this culture just rips it away. And I really like deep transparency. And that is what this cult or culture will not provide. There's no place on Amazon to buy spacious, intelligent, empathic kindness. It's the only thing I want. Not available. Therapists, let's say, let's give them 30% on that. But to drive maybe 30 minutes in traffic to meet someone who's only there because you're paying them for an hour, a week, or whatever, and then drive back, or let's say it's 6 hours a week, I want to be exploring that with people who want to explore it as much as I do. And I'm now married to a lovely Filipino woman, and we explore that together, and it is incredible. It's why I'm still here. But that being something that I knew that I wanted ever since, my teenage years. So from my teenage years on, I knew that I wanted that, and I could never find it. We have a scarcity mentality in the cult. So there's this constant feeling of being obfuscated and blocked from getting the thing that I want to co-create the most. And being a traumatically illiterate, emotionally illiterate, relationship illiterate, psychologically illiterate culture, no one gets a single hour of formal training in high school or college. When the whole premise of professionalism is to leave who you are at the door, there's not a lot that comes in at work. And so the majority of romantic relationships are reenactments of some form of trauma or relationship pattern that's generally not all that great. So it's just disappointing and painful and lonely, and at times traumatizing and re-traumatizing and heartbreaking, etc. So that's the core for me. That's the biggest pain in my life. It's the biggest grief in my life that has been robbed, precluded, taken away, etc. And my biggest anger is that I do have that part within me, empathic kindness with quality time, and it's not valued in this culture. It's valued in Thailand. So I spend a lot of time there, and so that's a great success to spend time in Thailand. It's valued in Thailand, but it's not valued in my country, and that hurts, and it pisses me off. It's very sad. And so I would say that seeking to create that for myself, seeking to create that for others, and in various ways protesting, criticizing, articulating, raging against, venting about the chauvinistic, materialistic, isolated, narcissistic version of our cult that cuts that off, that says that work is more important than relationships, that money is more important than the human beings that make it, that looking good is more important than being present, and in so many ways a long litany of chauvinism in which the feminine side in every man and woman is deranked, ignored, violated, shamed, and the masculine in every man and woman is competitively sought to kind of seek rank, and what's lost is deep, present, kind, tender empathy for these deep cultural wounds that we all carry and most of us bury. So that's really the core of the desire and the hate. You know, this is what I want. This is what is just so painful. It's it's hard to tolerate. And so that's really the context for whether it's praising something, engaging with something, criticizing something. That's really the context behind all of that.